And Scott with Grave Talks, coming to you from Savannah, Georgia, and Bonaventure Cemetery on a very special day. And I haven't done a live YouTube video in a minute and a half or so because I really just wasn't having any luck with the resolution. So we're going to try something a little different today. But nonetheless, we're over here in a unique section of Bonaventure Cemetery. It's kind of what I call, like every road in Bonaventure, it's like a cast of heroes or a hall of heroes ideas. I mean, or just, the famous dead. Let's put it that way. So, for example, we have the Coburn family here, and just really a matter of 50 feet or less from the grave of the sculptor John Walz, we have the famous actor Charles Coburn, who is considered a cremation internment. He has no headstone here, oddly enough, but he was born in Macon, Georgia, 1877. Died shortly after being featured in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and he was in over 100 movies, silent film, you name it, and won one Oscar in 1954, I believe, playing a serious role, but often he was kind of a comedic, comic type actor. But anyway, he was cremated here over the grave sites of his family in Savannah, but no headstone for Charles Coburn. Isn't that interesting? But we're really here to talk about Bonaventure's greatest artistic celebrity because it's his birthday, and that's the sculptor John Walz. He turns 178 today, born August 31st, 1844 in Württemberg, Germany. And John Walz is and again, this is just my summation. It doesn't mean it's, 1,000% accurate, but there are a lot of voices out there, celebrating the life and times of Walz. And, I've been researching him for a long time, so I know a few things, but, bear in mind that I'm always grateful for the other storytellers, the other historians. Obviously, Walz's family, very important. But anyway, John Walz is what I call a rags to riches story, an American immigrant, American dream tale come true, and then a great Savannah story, because I would not have a job without the sculptor John Walz. And, there's some debate about this, but there are 77 known monuments, but some estimates of well over 100. And that's probably because many were done by him that they can't really nail down, but are attributed to him. Sorry, we got some competing aircraft sounds there. But John Walz, he crossed the ocean many times for what I would call family, education, fame, and fortune. And I don't know if anybody ever gave this guy a free meal. I don't know a great deal about, let's say, the family wealth or all that lineage in Europe, except to say that, this was a guy who struggled. And if you think about a hammer, a chisel, a mallet, and a scraping tool with some sandpaper, I mean, what is a greater expression than, let's say, a hardworking individual, right? So, yeah, and just a part of my background too, I moved here to go to the Savannah College of Art and Design to study fine arts, and painting and drawing were kind of my area. And although the world of storytelling became really my foundry, I have a great admiration for the people that did this classically, and I think it's so cool to be, working in an environment which is really like a great art gallery to, one great artist, and his name was John Walz. And here we see the family plot of his wife, Sarah, a couple of memorials here to her first husband, which is a part of the reason Walz marries Sarah Gilmore, but we'll come back all the way around to that in a moment. So John Walz, around 1856, somewhere between there and 1858, he found his way to Baltimore, and he was really just a teenager. And his sister, I believe Mary, was a dressmaker there. And when the U.S. Census Bureau came around in 1860, and they asked the 16-year-old John Walz, "Hey, kid, what do you do?" He said, "Stonecutter." And what a statement. He was the young teenage dreamer, but At that time in life, particularly with maybe nothing to fall back on, he was now a man of the world. And, there are a lot of different timeline moments here, but I'll try to, frame this as accurately as possible. But in that period, if you really wanted to, put your name on something, Marble Studio, the whole thing, you had to have a few things on your resume, like some art academy, diplomas and the blessings of some other great artists. There wasn't just sort of like, what I would call the American street, idea today so much, where maybe you just get a business license, you start your thing, you make art, you sign it, you sell it all day long. Back then there was more of a real process, and a lot of the guys or the people that did, stonework like this really died in anonymity, or they were working for some other major sculptor their entire lives, which were sometimes very short lives, that they never really became known. In some sense, their names just, never made it to paper. But John Walz was born in a different era. And as I tell my tourists all the time, my visitors, part of his career success, conscious to him or not, was that in the United States, where you had this wide open land, the headstone trade was so in demand that to satisfy it, they had to kind of like loosen up the paradigm a little bit. They had to let these sculptors, I don't want to say skip a few steps, but they were going to have to kind of be a little more open to the idea that they could come in a little more freely and satisfy headstone demand or headstone art for these very wealthy families in the United States typically. So John Walz, how much he had that in mind exactly, I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows, but his other sister, Philippina, she lived in Philadelphia, and ultimately he would find his way there. And of course, all those stone quarries were up around Philadelphia, and it was a perfect environment, and as well many Masonic lodges. And you can kind of see the Freemason symbol up there with the compass and the square, the G. So Charles Gilmore, Walz's wife's former husband or first husband, was a Freemason. Walz was too, and I kind of wonder, when he got to Savannah, whether or not they encountered each other in that capacity. I mean, obviously they knew each other from the craftsmanship side, but were they also kind of brothers in Freemasonry? I don't know. But he learned through the Freemasons a lot about symbols. And, even before that, before being in Philadelphia, he found his way to the art academies of Europe and, his homeland. And one in particular was in Vienna, Austria, where he would meet his favorite professor, Tilschner. Tilschner ultimately would do business with the Telfer Museum in Savannah, Georgia, which is kind of a landing minute later for Walz. But Walz had a little more groundwork to do, and so around 1870 to 1872, somewhere in there, he ultimately became an apprentice, is going to be my word for it, for this sculptor in Paris, France, named Ami Millet. And Ami Millet, notable at the time, had a kind of an academy of his own there. He had done or did in his career the dome for the Paris Opera House. And it was through Ami Millet that he got another blessing, another level of his career in place. He showed him he could do some master copies, which, I have 2 of those in my collection, in my personal collection. And after that, we find him either winning a competition or being invited to participate. I'm not exactly sure of the particulars, but it was in Bulgaria of all places. And in the 1870s, there was a field where Christians had been slaughtered by the thousands by the Ottoman Empire, and a monument was basically, some kind of competition opened up for the monument to the massacre, and Walz had a hand in that, or it was completely his. I'm not exactly sure. But, this is a part of his, let's say, name ringing as a name to watch, a kid to watch, so to speak, right? But eventually, I would say the big American moment, I mean, I don't think this is really too much in debate, but it was the Gettysburg Battlefield Monument competition. And there had been a monument unveiled to the Pennsylvania 106th Infantry that was not exactly a wower. It was seen as an unsuccessful public monument. And so a secondary competition opened up, and Walz submitted a wax model and a drawing, and he was chosen. And when he unveiled the monument that is traditionally called the Silent Drums of Gettysburg, this was just a huge, win as far as notoriety. So imagine a lot of newspapers and magazines carrying, illustrations and photos and, even commentary on him and all the rest. But it was in that same year of 1889 that we find, I take that back a little bit. Walz had been visiting Savannah periodically in the mid-late 1880s, possibly because his brother Wilhelm, Bill, Wilhelm lived in Savannah. He worked in a hotel, and was he just here visiting him first, or was other stuff at play? I don't know. But I think he smelled a bit of that big fish, small pond minute. So when the Telfair Museum project started in 1883, his favorite professor basically, would supply 5 statues of famous artists that would still stand in front of the Telfair Museum. Some kind of deal was made for Walz to help install them, although I think a caveat of the discussion with his favorite professor in Vienna was that he would be able to sculpt or produce the statue of Rubens standing among the 5. And so if you all ever get to Savannah, you see the Telfair Museum. The Rubens statue, I believe, was done by Walz. And, in some sense, the rest is history. And talk about a guy whose career was blessed, but his personal life was not maybe blessed. I don't know if it was just that Walz was such a craftsman or he was insecure. I mean, he definitely had a confidence, but, like a lot of artists who are successful and do a lot of things, was he just not comfortable with it? I don't know. But he didn't get married till he was 63, and it becomes some sort of a story of a marriage of business convenience, because Sarah's husband, Charles, had owned a stone yard, and I don't know if that extended to a quarry or not, but a stone yard at the very least. And so this was going to add a new level to Walz being the front man, on the supply, the wheeling and the dealing to other sculptors and, people involved in building things. And then, of course, obviously, he was the big sculptural brand. So it was a win-win, and he married at 63 in 1907. And, Sarah's a bit of a mystery, a lot of question marks kind of surrounding, who she was personally, even down to what she looked like. Things of that nature I don't think have been answered completely. But Walz, around 1900, there was an interesting letter in the newspaper here in Savannah where he is writing a Dr. Dexter, almost a testimonial in kind of an editorial way, where, he talked about how he suffered with rheumatism, and I think it's like a GI tract kind of condition. And, you think about these artists, and under the stress they were often exposed to, they had a lot of anxiety. A lot of artists have anxiety. And you can imagine stomach problems, maybe, the food, the pre-improved sewage in cities. I mean, the body's being pummeled with a lot. And I don't want to say that he didn't have complete use of an arm around 1900, but he was very evidently in pain, respective of that, maybe shoulder arm through the rheumatism, obviously. And, if you think about his career and what he did for a living, I mean, a lot of those guys didn't make it past 40, you know what I mean? So here's a guy at 63 who's still banging it out. And ultimately, but apparently whatever cure or whatever, antidote, remedy, potion that Dr. Dexter had, Walz gave a testimonial in the paper and even talked about meeting Dr. Dexter's son, and that he was very gifted in art and would be glad to teach him if that was the will of the family. So, it's kind of an interesting personal glimpse into Walz as a kindly guy, but also a guy, dealing with ailments while he's still doing all this. But as time drifted on, Walz would produce a lot of great works, and then at 78 years of age, we find him at his end, really suffering with silicosis, which is kind of the short name, like pneumonia, right? He's choking to death on the dust from all the work and all the labor, and his lungs are done. So he succumbs to that at 78 years of age. And then the next great mystery was that there was just no headstone for Walz forever and a day. There was an empty space here next to Sarah's headstone when I moved to Savannah. And, I think some of that is in the controversy of their relationship. But the early stories I got from direct family members, one side of the family said that other sculptors were terrified of the challenge, the superstitiousness of it. If they did something that was less than worthy of the master Walz, then, it might be the death of them by reputation. So they avoided the project. Another side of the family, or family member anyway, told me that Sarah had one made, but she was dissatisfied with it. She had it destroyed, and before she could make another, she herself died, which sounds very reasonable. I would say there's some new information that suggests that Sarah just wanted, for not necessarily complete reasons of her own, but maybe some of the family on her side too, to disconnect a little bit. And that's going to just be my nice way of saying it or whatever. But, I don't know. Just, we know that the headstone was here and it was destroyed. In fact, I remember the foundation and the broken grout here. And it was just always kind of curious. But thankfully, guilty conscience, you could say, of maybe the society here. The Bonaventure Historical Society got it together, and they found this, if my understanding is right, this 19th century piece of Georgia marble, which is very rare. And I would guess through the Oglethorpe Granite and Marble Company, or the Marble and Granite Company, which has been doing stuff out here well over 110 years now in Savannah. And Virginia Mobley, who still answers the phone at that business. And, I won't, sort of say she's up there in years, but it's impressive that in her golden years that she is still answering the phone for that business. But she was enlisted to design the monument, and then her husband, my old buddy Dan, he helped, I think, put it down here, because that's what he did, forever and ever and ever. But he passed away in 2020. God love him. But we see an unfinished piece of Georgia marble with Walz's name lovingly inscribed there. And I always just love, like, the Z in that name, like Zorro. But we see the mallet, the chisel, the scraping tool, and then really his other instrument was sandpaper. Pneumatic tools, electric tools, not online at that point, really in a big way. I'm sure he handled them, had seen them, but, he just didn't feel like that was in the natural course, really. So he was really an old schooler. And I think all of this, in the headstone interpretation done by Virginia Mobley is just, a beautiful testament. Boy, she's a blessed person for being able to say that, her family business and she herself helped create this. So, God love the Mobleys. But God love John Walz, my spiritual employer. You gave me, in many ways, my life. So we thank you. And here on your birthday today, August 31st, your 178th, in the year of our Lord, 2022. It's my great honor just to say to you, sir, happy birthday in heaven. And I hope you're enjoying that pint of Guinness with the angels and all the other hallowed sculptors above. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is Shannon Scott with Grave Talks. It's been an honor.